Call this meeting to order. Before we start, I'd just like to remind everybody, please turn off your electronic or silence your electronic devices before we start. And at this time, if I can call on Sheila Brown for the national anthem at the podium. Everybody can please rise if you are able.
Oh, Canada, our home and native land, true patriot love in all of us command. With glowing hearts we see thee rise, the true north, strong and free. From far and wide, O Canada, we stand on guard for thee. God, keep our land glorious and free. O Canada, we stand on guard for thee. O Canada, we stand on guard for thee.
Thank you, Sheila. Best voice in the region. Got to be lucky. Madam Clerk, introduction of addendum and delegation items.
There are two addendum items this evening. One being a memo from Luke Rowe regarding designating Sports Fest as a municipally significant event in order to allow alcohol at the event. And the second amendment is to amend the recommended motion for item number 7, committee appointments, to include the following members to the Port Colborne Historic and Marine Museum Board: Claudia Brema and Albert Murphy, as well as 2 associate members, Beena Patel and John Maloney.
Okay, thank you, Madam Clerk. I need a mover and a seconder for confirmation of the agenda. Councillor Bodnar, Councillor Beauregard. Any questions? All those in favor? That's unanimous. Councillor Danch. Any disclosures of interest? Starting on my left, Councillor Bodnar, any disclosures? Councillor Beauregard.
Your Worship, I have a conflict of interest on item number 4. I'm employed by Sullivan Mahoney, who is the city solicitor, and they provided legal advice on this matter.
Thank you. On to my right here, anybody? Seeing none. I have one set of minutes, the regular meeting of Committee of the Whole 01-20 held on January 13th, 2020. A mover and a seconder, Councillor Wells, Councillor Bagu. Any questions? All in favor? Unanimous. Determination of items requiring separate discussion. I'll start on my left this evening, Councillor Bodnar.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Item 4, 6, and 9.
Six and 9, you said? Yes. Thank you. Councillor Kalaliff, Councillor Danch.
Number 3.
Item number 3. Councillor Beauregard. Item 1. Councillor Bruno.
3 and 4.
Okay. Councillor Bagu.
1, 3, 4.
1, 3, 4. They've been drawn. Councillor Desmarais. Nothing. Councillor Wells.
Already drawn.
Already drawn. Thank you, Councillor. Okay, approval of items not requiring separate discussion. A mover and a seconder. Councillor Kalaliff, Councillor Damaris. Questions? All in favor? Carried unanimously. No presentations. We have one delegation this evening, Council. John Lohus and Ray Hurd, representing Communities in Bloom, Ontario, regarding the Communities in Bloom program. Gentlemen, welcome. If you want to come up to the podium on the right-hand side here, my right, your left. And there's a little red button on the speaker, if you would press that.
Thank you, Your Worship, Council, staff. Thank you for the opportunity to come and present a little information about Communities in Bloom and Communities in Bloom, Ontario, its values, benefits, and a special thank you to Councillor Donna. It's nice to meet you again. I also want to recognize Lincoln, one of your neighbors, close neighbors, for hosting a workshop that we held there recently, and it was very well attended, and Councillor Palliative was a member attending that session as well. John and I will be presenting separate components. I get the bones, and John gets the flesh that goes on the bones. So bear with us, and having been a municipal councillor myself for many terms in Huron County, our goal is brevity and clarity. I would think you'd all agree with that. I'm a former national director with Communities in Blooms, a current provincial director, and a judge in the province of Ontario. In the past 10 years, well over 200 Ontario communities have participated in Communities in Bloom, and our mission is simply a commitment to fostering civic pride, environmental responsibility, beautification, and improvement of quality of life through community participation, with the focus on promotion of green spaces in the community settings. Very simple. We are not, a misnomer would be to think we're just simply all about flowers. We want the community to bloom. The flowers will do that automatically with a little tender love and care. Basically, the program is as follows. The first thing a new community or a community entering the program would need is the creation of a Communities in Bloom committee. It could be comprised of representatives from council, municipal staff, could be the parks manager, along with community stakeholders such as representation from service clubs, garden clubs, environmentalists, horticultural club members, and critically important, the role that a community volunteer would play in fostering civic pride. It's accumulation of all those minds and energies and passions that come together to make it a true success. Dollars, you don't need big dollars to get involved in the program. That's a misnomer, so I'll leave my colleague John to speak a little bit to that in the second part of the program. Upon registering in the program, judges are assigned and become your primary liaisons for the term of your registration, which is an annual registration. They may well assist and are expected to assist in preparing and establishing baseline criteria for the new communities, and also respond to the many questions and concerns that may be emanating from your committee. The best practices from all other CIB communities across the province will be made available to your community so that you get off in the right spot, the right step, right off the mark. The judges will be in your community doing an evaluation, usually for a day and a half, at a time that will become mutually agreeable to availability of judges and for you in the community. You may wish, as many communities do, have it coincide with a special community event. It puts a little icing on that cake. A copy of the evaluation grid will be provided well in advance to your committee so that you will know exactly what the expectations would be coming from the judges. Preparing for the tour and establishing an itinerary will be assisted also by the judges well in advance, so we do a lot of the groundwork and prep for you. The cost to the community would simply be the registration fee. John will, I presume you'll get into that.
Just $700.
It's $700 for a full registration for the entire year for a community of your size. And this information is available on the registration form that nice young lady put out to everybody. The cost really is the registration and accommodating the judges during their tour. Hotels, B&Bs, we've even had committee members who have a really nice extra bedroom in their home that they make that available to the judges while they're doing their judging for that 1 or 2 nights that they're in your community. We are one of the first things I experienced as a counselor, my first question was, hit me with the bottom line. What's the cost? So at CIB Ontario, we're conscious of that and really try and minimize that impact on the community. Either would be suitable for housing our judges, including the meals, which may be special sessions, as they do their traveling, doing their judging. The judges traveling along with the committee members assigned to conduct a tour on this evaluation would evaluate your community very simply. We consider climate, the capacity of your community, and the current environmental conditions. I've judged communities where they've had an ice storm or a huge rain event. All their beautiful works down the drain, but we realize that that's just life in a community. It's recommended that a creation of a community profile book, and we can supply examples to the committee, be undertaken to capture the essence of your community. If your community has an economic development person, economic development, an EDO, or you have linked to economic development, they are a great resource, and they benefit, believe me, really strongly out of this program. Economic development, a great factor. There are basically 6 elements to the evaluation, and that's the conversation piece that goes back and forth from the judges to the committee and the community. Tidiness, environmental action, heritage conservation, urban forestry, including trails and support entities, landscape and floral displays. Each of these elements is split into 4 subcategories. For example, take tidiness. We look at that through 4 different lenses: the municipal sector, the businesses and institutions, the residential, and very, very important, the community involvement aspect. Each of the first 3 are fairly well self-explanatory, while the community involvement details the level of engagement with service clubs, garden clubs, horticultural societies, community associations, as well as all other financial and in-kind participation that is availed to you while you're in the program. The evaluation is based on a numeric scale and is assessed by judges who have both in-depth knowledge and experience on a broad field involved, with the critical component of most value being a very, very in-depth written report on all of these primary sectors for your committee, with key references to best practices and containing opportunities for improvement. The report will, when completed, will be available to the CIB Community Committee and presented by the lead judge or both judges. An explanation behind the grading will be given at that time. Remember, judges are your judges for the entire year, so take advantage of them. The presentation, the results presentation, would be made at either a CIB provincial symposium, but again, what we're swinging to is recognizing the minimal cost, trying to minimize cost. We would bring that to the committee, and if necessary, present that with the committee to you, learned people at council and the mayor. So on to John.
Ray and I have both been on both sides of the fence. I was most recently in municipal work. I was head of community services and parks and all the other subsets at City of Mississauga for 16 years. And after that, I was the general manager and CEO of Niagara Parks Commission for 5 years, and now I'm retired. And then they put me to work as a Rotary president in Tillsonburg now. Ray, he's in Goderich, but I'd like to emphasize and we've been judging in a lot of communities. I think the biggest benefit for you would be to rediscover what your community is all about. We found, and you talked about the profile book, the sort of description of what makes a community. And we've had sometimes as many as 50 to 100 different organizations or entities that are so proud to be part of a community that you rediscover it. So all the service clubs, all the heritage and horticultural, the Downtown Business Association is a critical one, that if you have one, or a BIA, because one of the, and we can tell instantly if you go around the province which one has been a Communities in Bloom member, because the downtown is thriving. It's a beautiful place, it looks cared for, and it makes a difference. When people get their impressions of a community, it starts right away, and probably don't need to tell you that. We do have judges that are very experienced, and we choose them carefully, and we train them. And so there's a big database of best practices, benchmarking, and continuous improvement that is part of the CIB program. So you can imagine lots of reports that describe what other communities are doing, and you can actually learn from those communities. The other thing I think that really is a benefit is you have a reason for people in the community to get together to form that committee, and beyond, kids that want to plant trees, older people that want to have a role in the community, and you end up building your volunteer base. And it's amazing how many people rediscover, where you're going. So service club contributions in the past get new energy, and you're able to have some pride and improvement in a forward-looking municipality. I think I'll stop there for questions and answers.
We would open that up, if I may, if we still have a couple of seconds left, or a moment or two, and field any Q&As, any questions that Your Worship, you and your team would like to pose us with?
Well, I've put on the screen, and thank you. The program benefits, I think we condensed in bullet form, and that's up on your screens. I think I've covered most of them in terms of why get involved.
Great, thank you, gentlemen. Councillor Bruno.
Thank you, Worship. Thanks for the excellent presentation. I know of some of the communities in Niagara that have been involved in the past. My question is more about on your registration sheet. Friends category, community is not evaluated. I think there needs to be lots of foundation laid before even the need for an evaluation. That can be corporate culture, that can be a lot of things. I was interested in some of, just in the program benefits, some of the highlights you'd say. I'm wondering if you could describe to us what, at the initial stage, the Friends category might involve and what benefit there would be. In other words, those lists of things you need to do if you're going to be evaluated, and perhaps there's a crawl, walk, run, where you get yourself to a baseline before you enter the NHL.
If I may, thank you for your question, Councillor. You hit a very interesting comment at the very end there, was baseline. What we've done, I'll give you an example, Greater Sudbury. This one community, very small community, never involved. We actually had a conversation with the committee and said, maybe if you did the registration, between the two of us doing an evaluation, we could create a new baseline from which you can grow. The Friends category, you're absolutely correct, there is a Friends category. The Friends category is non-evaluated, but what it does, it complements the community by giving them access to our website and all of the expertise that judges can provide. The only thing it doesn't happen is you don't have judges coming to your community and establishing that baseline, but it gives them all of the other reasons why they want to connect with the community. Most communities I have found would like that baseline established because it gives them that one-on-one, face-to-face with judges that creates that in and out, that give and take, and kind of clarifies where they are. They may even rethink about the program a little bit and maybe we can tweak it a little bit to meet their needs and demands. But there are two different, of course, the cost of a friend is somewhat less than the cost because we don't have to submit judges and bring them and do the evaluation. But most communities come in because they want that face-to-face and establish that baseline. Does that help at all?
I said, the same question was asked when I was in Mississauga by Mayor McCallion. And I quickly learned she was a gardener, and, you know, she's careful with the money too. And what happened there was each of the wards sort of took stock of what they had in each of the wards. And very quickly they saw the benefits of engaging each ward with all the people that became more knowledgeable about the program. So the next year was going forward.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Clayliff?
First, I'd like to say thank you through you, Mr. Mayor, to these gentlemen. I had the pleasure of spending a whole day in the workshop with them. I learned so much. And like they said, it was interesting to me because it was almost like you're going to be competing with other people, but you're almost competing with yourselves as a town to see how much better you can do. And when I heard different ones talking at this workshop about the benefits to their communities and the things they were able to do to engage their garden clubs, all the different people within the community. And I've heard that. I've only been here a year as a councillor, and I've heard from so many people, oh, I'd like to do this or I'd like to do that. And I really think this would give them an excellent opportunity to do that. But at the same time, I think the benefit of being a community in bloom is that baseline comes from the exterior, someone coming in with eyes that doesn't live here and able to do that kind of evaluation. Because when I heard all the talk that day, I kept thinking about we have trails, we have the seaway, we have everything. We have so many of the things going that they were talking about. And I thought it would be nice to have someone come in from outside and kind of give us an idea of things we could do to improve it or not, or things that we could share with others or learn from others. So that was kind of my reason for asking these gentlemen if they would come and speak to us tonight. So I hope that everyone will consider it. And I've already talked to the garden club and they're on board. Anyway, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Any further questions? Seeing none, John and Ray, very much appreciated it, and we know Councillor Clayliff will bring this forward during budget time.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, gentlemen. Council, we did pass item number 2, but Cruz Ovenden is here this evening and has spoken to our clerk. He knows that we've passed this, but he would still like to speak. If that's the wish of council, I need a mover and a seconder to allow him to be a delegation. Councillor Bruno, you'll move that. Councillor Wells, you'll second that. Okay, any questions to that, council? All those in favor? That's carried. Cruz, come on forward. Just remind you of your 10-minute limit. Thanks.
I just want to say thank you for letting me come up, even though you've already passed this. And hello, and thank you for having me back regarding the cleanup fines on my mother's property. Even if the bylaw allows this charge for a messy yard, I will argue fines cannot be transferred to another person not under control of the property or associated directly with the fine. Under the Charter of Canada in Section 7, it reads as follows: all Canadians are guaranteed their life, liberty, and personal security, and requires that the government respect that basic principles of justice whenever they are intrude on those rights. Transferring a fine to the next tenant of the land shows no respect of this law. The bylaw fines happened when I was a minor under 18 and I had no control over the household or my mother's actions. I am willing to take this to Superior Court with the help of public relations crowdfunding for a lawyer. So far, I've paid a total of $8,822.60, including a water bill, to bring everything up to date. I'm asking this council to void all interest charges and penalties under the circumstances. Thank you for your consideration and help. And I also have a breakdown of the charges since 2017 for each councillor, if you'd like.
Okay. Any questions, council? Okay. Thanks, Cruz. Okay, on to the mayor's report. The city distributes approximately $30,000 annually to nonprofit, charitable, and service organizations that benefit the citizens of Port Colborne and enhance the quality of life in the community. Council recently updated the grant policy and application form, and all information can be found on our city website. The city is accepting the first round of grant applications until Friday, January 31st, 2020. So that's the end of this week. The City of Port Colborne is looking to gather further feedback to improve our customer service delivery by launching a customer service satisfaction survey. Input from the community will assist the city with the modernization of our service delivery and improve our frontline service to residents and visitors. Participate by completing the survey, which takes approximately 5 minutes. All you have to do is visit www.portcolborne.ca/page/customer service. Hard copies of the survey are also available at City Hall and the Port Colborne Public Library. It's almost time to get out and enjoy our upcoming Sports Fest from February the 7th to the 9th. The brochures were out last week, providing a sense of community pride and greater awareness of each community group. Sports Fest offers activities for all ages, promotes a healthy lifestyle, and is an opportunity for organized fundraising within the City of Port Colborne. Check out the city website for a full list of activities. The Mayor's Cup Invitational Hockey Tournament will have your Port Colborne team playing at 6 p.m. on Friday night and 2 and 4 p.m. on Saturday at the Valley Health and Wellness Center. Come out and cheer the City of Port Colborne team on. The final event of the weekend is the Polar Plunge to raise money for Special Olympics. Registration will take place at the boat launch at H.H. Knoll, Lakeview Park on Sunday at 1 p.m. with the plunge happening at 3 p.m. Come out and cheer on the participants who will be freezing for a reason. And councillors, I implore you, I will be doing this. I will be jumping in the water, and because we are raising funds, anything from $5 on up, if you want to put it towards the mayor's plunge, I'd ask you to do that. And my wife isn't working that weekend, and I've convinced her she's going to do the plunge also. Yeah, she'll be there for CPR. No, we do have all our safety people all online. We have our fire department and everybody else that we need for it. So, but that should be a great event. It's the first year for the Polar Plunge. So come on out and see. Come on, Frank. Come on. We can get you out. It's Sunday, Frank. You're not even working. And there's no football. So.
I hope you realize that our fire department doesn't do water rescues.
Yeah. Well, they're all set to go anyways. Our photo contest deadline, the hour hashtag Port Colborne Proud photo contest deadline is approaching for January the 31st, again the end of the week. The purpose of the photo contest is to showcase what's beautiful, creative, innovative, and authentic about Port Colborne and feature original, engaging photos that will evoke a sense of community pride in residents and inspire visitors to discover Port Colborne and explore all the city has to offer. All the details of how to submit your photos is on the City of Port Colborne's website. So for those out in TV land and watching us, please remember, get those photographs in. Council, on the weekend you'll notice there was a story in the local newspaper with regards to Nickel Beach. So Port Colborne High School did a study on the beach with regards to plastics. They did they didn't, but another group did a similar study on Sunset Beach in St. Catharines. Big difference between the two, they found the little tiny plastics in St. Catharines, but they didn't find any here. I was amazed. However, they did talk about lots of garbage and the types of garbage they found. I grew up on the lake, and we just went through two of the biggest windstorms in modern history in Port Colborne, and we don't leave the beach in these conditions. Our staff cleans it from spring until we close in the late summer, and then during the winter time, obviously we don't clean it. Coming to the new spring, we get out there and we do a thorough scrubbing of the beach. But because of those storms, and not just those two, but I think because of the power of the wind and the waves, it's amazing what you'll find along the beach after a storm. And God knows where it came from. Beer bottles and plastic bottles and tires and bags of this, bags of that, all kinds of stuff. So it's not that our beach was dirty because of the community, it's because of these storms. So the beach was put to bed clean, but those storms brought a lot of stuff. And if you travel anywhere between excuse me, Fort Erie and Wainfleet, you'll find very similar things on the beach. But it is a program that I know our staff still wants to work with Port High moving forward to keep an eye on our beach and to look at it. So I think different times of the year would be neat to see as far as what times of the year. And I assume that the fall is the worst because those November storms can bring pretty big waves crashing down on not just Nickel Beach, but all the beaches along the lake. So I just wanted to make sure people out there knew that we don't leave our beach dirty. So, but if there is anybody doing stuff during the winter time, and we'd ask you not to leave, especially your dog dirt in your dog litter bags on our beach. Please pick them up, put them in your own garbage, and put them out at the curb on your garbage day. So that's it for my mayor's report. Any questions? Councillor Bruno.
Well, thank you, Mr. Mayor, for volunteering, and it's for a good cause. So I'll start the ball rolling with $50 if you do that.
Thank you, Councillor. I appreciate that. Okay, so let the rest of you think about that. As I said, $5 and up, that'd be great. Any dollar we raise is the best. Regional Councillor Butters is not here tonight. And does anybody have any regional items that they wish to bring forward? Okay, thank you. Under item 13, councillors' items. First is staff responses to previous councillors' inquiries. Staff, I'll go right to left tonight. Anything? Clerk's office? Nothing. Councillors' issues, I'll start on my left this week. Councillor Bodner.
I'll pass for now, thanks.
Councillor Clayliff.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I guess it's going to be to Steve because Chris isn't here tonight. I just had a question. Last year we had made the decision that we were going forward with the signage on Clarence and Catherine Street regarding the stoplight, the traffic slowing signs, and Chris had said that they were on back order. He expected them in. Last time we talked about it was September. I just wondered if you might be able to give us a report, maybe next time, or I don't know if you know it now, how things are, and get a final date for installation of those.
Steve?
Through you, Your Worship, Councillor Clayliff. We do have the actual posts in stock right now, so they're ready to go for first thing in the spring, and then we'll also be looking at the signs, and they'll be installed at the exact same time.
Great.
Thank you. Councillor?
Thank you very much, Steve. And secondly, Gary beat me to it because I was going to support our mayor because I saw the fire chief's getting a lot of money, guys. So you've got $50 from me too.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Danch, anything to report?
Just one item, I think is a Steve thing here. Corner of Fielden and Kalali, there's a stop sign on the corner there. I can walk by and catch this in the side of my head. I mean, it needs to either be raised or moved over. Some kid on a bicycle is going to go by there and he's going to take his head off. It's kind of on our morning route, and I've been meaning to mention this, and if you kind of look into that for me, right across from McKay, okay? Thank you.
North side of the North
side,
Street?
yeah, on Fielden.
On Fielden, yeah. Got that, Steve? Yeah. Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Bruno?
Thank you, Worship. Two items.
$60 now that you...
Two items tonight. One is for Steve. Steve's been brought to my attention by a colleague and I'm sure by residents. Reservoir Park along Elm Street. Last year there was a open culvert dug by the region. I know that was to drain some of from the backyards along Borden and to alleviate some of the flooding potential in there, and I think even across the road to the business there. I'm just wondering, that was not cleaned up last year, the spill, and lots of grass and weeds were growing off it, and I'm just wondering if you know why it's there. Is it the regions, and can that get cleaned up?
Steve?
Through you, Your Worship, to Councillor Bruno. We actually have that material there from the ditching alongside Elm Street at Reservoir Park, and it's our material, so it was left there. What we'll end up doing is, there was plans to create a bit of a berm there. I think there was more material than what was originally expected. So what we'll do is we'll actually speak with our operations department, and we'll start hauling some of that material off-site to make it more of a subtle berm at that.
Great, thank you. The other item I have is with respect to tendering or expressions of interest. I know back in the day we had had insurance for the municipality tendered, and I would like to see more of that. In particular, so through you to the CAO, with respect to Canal Days, we have vendors there. The big one that I've been asked about is the beer and spirits that are sold there. It may have been tendered out in the past. It's been one company that certainly served us very well, but I'd like to see that actively go out for expressions of interest or tender, whatever the appropriateness is of that, so everyone gets a shot at that. And the other one is with our banking. Just like our auditors are tendered out and now our insurance is tendered out, I'd like to see that happen with banking fees as well. So I'm wondering if you could look into that.
Scott?
Sure, through your worship to Councillor Bodner, I'll just comment briefly. I can look into both.
Councillor Bruno?
Sorry, Councillor Bruno, what did I say?
I can understand.
Oh, sorry for that.
You're looking at
To all the councillors, really.
He has hair, that one doesn't.
Sorry, it's been a long time. It's been a long time. I'm still getting used to being back at this desk and everything. So, to Councillor Bruno and the rest of council, I will look into those things, but I will provide some commentary in advance if that's okay. Alcohol sales, specifically at Canal Days. So we sell our own alcohol, but we buy the alcohol from one of the national vendors. There are only two. The price is highly regulated. So the purchase decision is not based so much on the price as much as it's based on if there's a added value to the city. So for example, a Canal Day sponsorship, other things that can be offered to Canal Days to offset the budget or to enhance the visitor experience. And we have had those conversations over the years. I think the last time would have been 2017 Canal Days, and decided to stick with the same national supplier. We do try to keep a limited number of choices for folks. We try to have a wide range of products, but not so many that is holding up lines. We're trying to also move people through. If it's a matter of choosing between those two national vendors, I think we can go back and have those conversations again. If it's a matter of including others, such as craft beer, micro beer, the distilleries that are emerging, I think there might be another way to include them in the Canal Days sort of experience, whether that's, you know, a different bar at the Canal Days concerts, a different place in the footprint of Canal Days, even some kind of a beer garden that features craft beer or something like that to enhance the visitor experience again. But I will have those conversations with staff and with those providers. In terms of financial services and specifically banking, we do deal with one bank in the city. It's CIBC. We have since approximately 1989. It's a long relationship. And we don't pay bank fees. We pay $0 per month for bank fees. And we have financial instruments at other banks, and we've moved those from time to time. And we have corporate credit cards at other institutions, and we move those from time to time. But on the same basis, it might be good to find out if there's some kind of an added value to the city. For example, sponsorship. Naming rights on buildings, if there's some reason to move our finances to a different institution. Paying $0 is good, but maybe some kind of added value to the city could improve that arrangement for the city as a corporation. The last thing I'll say about that is that there is some difficulty, I shouldn't say difficulty, there's some cost and some upheaval to switching banks, including, printed material that we already own, blank checks and so on, banking information with other outside organizations and whatnot. So I would recommend that it's done on a less frequent basis than something like paving roads or in concrete work or something, maybe 5 to 10 year contracts that could ensure that the cost of moving is spread over a longer business relationship. So I'll have the same conversation with staff. Thank you.
Just to give you a further answer on the beverage side of things for Canal Days, the Canal Days committee has been talking about another event. We did hear some good news back today with regards to a new event, or an event that hasn't been here in quite a number of years, and trying to partner with some local business for that. So you'll hear more coming out of the Canal Days committee on that. So good, thank you, Councillor. Councillor Baggy.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. I just have 3 items. First item is last Tuesday on January 21st. We had a quarter revision meeting here, just to keep councillors in the loop. And regarding the Skelton Municipal Drain, which is on Highway 58, affects Waynfleet, Township of Waynfleet, and the City of Welland. And I'm happy to announce that Councillor Walls was unanimously voted in as chairperson of the meeting. It was a very short meeting. I think it was I was home in 15 minutes from the start. And there were no verbal or late appeals presented. So I would probably say the work would probably commence fairly soon, and unless some unforeseen circumstances arrive. So that's the one item.
So that was a landslide vote, I understand, of 1.
Well, there's actually...
Is there only 2 or is there 3?
3
there is
had a
3,
vote,
so it was a vote of 2 then.
He had to compete.
Thank you, Councillor.
The second item was the last Saturday I took a walk around the Valet Center and noticed all the water leaks in gym number 1, gym number 1A, gym number 2, whatever, and top of the stairs. And I did send an email to Nicole, who sent an email to Stephen, who sent an email to Rich, I think, and it went around a bit. And anyways, Mr. Shipikoski was nice enough to reply before a council meeting tonight, and a very well planned repairs to the Valet Center roof leaks. And I did copy all the councilors on it, so everybody's kept in the loop on what's going on. So I'd like to thank Stephen for the prompt replies.
Just, are you on that?
Yeah, on that.
Steve, will you give council an update and the public, please?
Through your worship to council, we're actually planning to complete some of the gutter works on top of the roof in December last year, but we ended up getting the materials delayed. So we're actually planning what needs to happen first is the gutter system is going to get lined. So in order to line it, it has to be approximately 10 degrees Celsius. So we can't really do it at this time, but we do have all the material stocked ready to go. So in the spring, that's our first plan, is to get up there, start lining the gutter system and then the downspouts, and then we're going to re-insulate, which should resolve all of the issues there.
Okay.
So the YMCA could probably throw all their water pails away after end of April. We have a big car wash. The last item was directed, I guess, to the CAO. He came back to work, I think, about 3 hours after the last city council meeting, so I saved this one for you. Last May 6th and 7th, we had our strategic planning meetings at Roselawn with the city staff and the young leaders on staff and city council. And I was just wondering, are we planning to complete the strategic planning? I think there's one more session, if I'm not mistaken.
Sure, through your worship to Councillor Bagu, it's timely. This is a timely question. If you would have been in City Hall this morning, you would have seen the consultant from the strategic planning exercise sitting in my office. We have a plan to dedicate some time to preparing the final report. So I don't know If a final session with council is in the offing, we are going to work on the city's core mission, vision, and values with the leadership team from last year, the leadership team from this year, and the city directors to include in the report, along with the goals and objectives that were set by council in those 2 visioning sessions. I can't say the door is closed on another meeting with council prior to presenting a final report to council, but let me talk to the consultant from the strategic plan exercise. The target timeline is 2 months, which is approximately, well, we talked today in my office about March 31st, the end of March, for a final report to council. So if that translates on Monday nights to the first Monday in April, I guess we'll be sitting here in 2.5 months to get something before you. But I do plan on making this my #1 objective for the first quarter of the year.
Okay. Good. Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Demery?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you, I do have a question, most likely to Steve, and it's about the tree replacement program. And I just wondered, considering the number of trees we've lost, and it's a significant number, due to disease or pests or weather, the more I drive around, the more I see these huge blank spaces where they weren't before. And I'm wondering, are we going to step up our tree replacement program, or are we leaving it intact? How are we going to deal with that? Because, the need is greater than it ever was.
Steve?
Through you, Your Worship, to Councillor Desmarais. Right now, we're actually reviewing, so the EAC brought forth a boulevard tree planting program at last meeting. So we're currently reviewing that, picking out trees that are actually suitable for boulevard planting, with the basis on getting different types of species, so that if we do have an issue like the ash borer beetle, it'll mitigate our losses, right? So that is something we're looking at. And then at that, we're also looking at completing a tree inventory of the city. So you'll see a budget request come forward for that for the year. So that's another tool that we can actually use to see what kind of trees are in certain areas, so we know what kind of trees to start planting in those areas. So with those in conjunction, I think we can really progress forward to implementing a tree replacement program.
Councillor?
Okay, well, that's good to know. Thank you. I just, previously we had X number of trees that we would do in say, a year. I'm just wondering if we're going to up that number, or is it going to be status quo?
Steve?
Through you, Your Worship, I can look into the exact numbers, and I can get back to you at the next council meeting of exactly what the plans are for this year and how many we're going to plant.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Wells, anything?
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you to Steve. First thing, I'd like to say thank you for getting those barriers up at the end of Weaver Road and Pinecrest Road. Residents saw them, they recognized them, and they sent the thanks out to me. Following up with that, though, there is some questions have been raised in regards to taking a look at those road ends and those roadways and to making them consistent. I was just wondering if there's any update in regards to when something was going to be done on that, when staff was going to start to look at that.
Steve?
Through Your Worship, to Councillor Wells, I believe you're referring to the gates at the end.
Yes, the gates, the no parking signs, make them consistent so that when people go down one road, they know if they get turned away from that one road, they know they're going to get turned away from the next road. Same thing with speed limits, the stuff that was mentioned in the Ward 4 meeting.
Through Your Worship, to Councillor Wells. For the gates, we're going to put a budget item forward, so you'll see that in the council pack or the budget package for this year. At the same time, we can start implementing all of the sign changes too. We're currently in the midst of talking to a consultant about the speeds and reevaluating what speed the road should actually be, so that there's some consistency there. So we should be able to do that this summer, no problem, as long as the budget's approved for those items.
Thank you.
Good. Thank you, Councillor. On to item 14, consideration of items. I'm going to move item 9 to the front, Council. We have Joanne Ferraccioli here, who we share with the town of Fort Erie, so instead of keeping Joanne here all night, we'll move that. Councillor Bodner, if you want to move item 9, please.
Yes. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Community and Economic Development Department, Health Services Division, Report 2020-13, subject, grant funding request to support community palliative care.
Thank you. Can I get a seconder for that? Councillor Wells. I'll just go to Joanne then. Yes. Councillor, thank you. Joanne, thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me back. I think that it's really important that we address palliative care in both communities. I think that every single one of us in some way or other has been touched by the services of Dr. Kim Sher and his program. And I think if the bottom line is by adding in a nurse practitioner, we can increase the capacity and ensure sustainability of this very busy program. We are going to be working diligently with Ontario Health and with the ministry to find sustainable funding and to increase the funding to a pain and symptom management program. We are working with Hospice Niagara on this. But at the end of the day, we can't wait. Ontario Health is very new. We do not have an Ontario Health team here in Niagara yet, so we can't wait. So we need to find a way to fund this, get it off the ground, and do it a little bit backwards and show them how successful we can be by adding in a nurse practitioner right in the community-led initiative to show that we can address palliative care. Keeping folks out of emergency will save the system a lot of money. And what happens is when someone is deemed palliative, sometimes their wish is to have their end-of-life care at home, but sometimes that doesn't happen, and either the caregiver burns out or it's more than they can manage, and they end up, so many folks, I don't have the numbers with me tonight, but it was unbelievable, the numbers of folks that are actually dying in the hallway of the emergency room. And if we can increase the capacity and have Dr. Sher and his team look after folks either at both hospital sites in the end-of-life care beds or in the community, that would go a long way to increasing the capacity.
Oh. Use the camera.
Uh-oh.
How's your battery pack? Okay. Any questions for Joanne with regards to this? Councillor Bodnar.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So maybe somebody watching doesn't know the whole story that we're sharing this with Fort Erie, and we also share you with Fort Erie and our health services, so which has proven to be just a fabulous opportunity for us. So I just wanted to kind of put that out there because people may be wondering, you did mention another partner, but you didn't say Fort Erie. But it's really good news. It's good news for us, and good news that this doctor is doing what needs to be done. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Palliative.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Joanne. Thank you very much. Everybody here has no idea how much this is needed, or maybe you all do, but I strongly support what's happening and what Joanne's putting forward. Our communities have a lot of elderly people, and to be able to keep people in their communities rather than having to send them halfway across this peninsula because we don't have enough beds here for them. So anything that we can do to promote it is very, very welcome. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Beauregard.
Yep, through your worship to Joanne. How did you come up with the $25,000 figure? Where did that come from?
Joanne?
Yeah, the cost of a nurse practitioner is approximately $100,000. Dr. Sher is paying half of it, $50,000, half coming from Fort Erie and half coming from Port Colborne. There's an equal number of end-of-life care beds in both communities at both hospital sites that Dr. Sher is the attending physician at, and he sees equally the same number of folks in Port Colborne and Fort Erie for his home visits.
Okay, Councillor.
You said approximately 100,000, I believe, right? If it ends up being more than that, or would you come back and ask for more money from us? How would that difference be accommodated?
Through you, Your Worship, to Councillor Beauregard's question, no, that would come on Dr. Sher. He would pay the rest, but the cost of a nurse practitioner is $100,000. That's what would be in the contract.
Okay, thank you, Councillor. Councillor Bruno.
Thank you, Worship. Through you to Joanne. Yes, welcome back on the new program. certainly we've gotten some great value up to now. We anticipate even more. And being on the committee with Councillor Bodner and Councillor Califf, and we see a lot, and we see how much these outside-of-the-box solutions are part of just raw initiative in your experience with Ontario Health and with the province. So I'm not here to go on about what you've done with the FOs and the recruitments up to now, but this is another example of why, with Joanne here, we've been able to tackle some of these issues that in some cases are well beyond the means of a community our size. And so you've made it work, and I want to thank you for that. What I want to ask you in particular about this is a lot of physicians who use nurse practitioners under their billing are able, because of the use of the nurse practitioner, able to garner those funds back from the province, and the doctor pays the nurse practitioner, and that's why you don't see this ask for nurse practitioners that are working in like a family practice or FO. And so I'm wondering if the hope is that in the course of a year, is the idea that the province will see the value of it, whilst there might not be the volume that there would in a practitioner's office that helps self-fund it? So is this to be looked at as a whole new scenario because it's palliative care? If you could just speak to that.
Am I on now? Yep. Through you, Your Worship, to Councillor Bruno. Yes, palliative care is a little bit different than primary care. In primary care, a patient's visit might be 15 minutes. So through shadow billing, it's a concrete amount of money that's going to be billed back. As we all know, palliative care, a visit with a patient in their home, could be very, very long, and much of that care is bundled. So it's a certain amount of money for to service end of life. So the intent is to show the value, more so the value of pain and symptom management at the point of care, either in the home or in a pain and symptom management clinic, to keep folks out of the hospital. So it's a little more upstream.
Good. Thank you, Councillor. Any further questions? Councillor?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, but actually to Gary, palliative care, I think Jen would say would be one of the most cost-effective ways of dealing with end of life, at home or in hospital. As Joanne said, care can be 2, 3, 4 hours. Just you never know what's going to happen. So the billing piece of it is very difficult to go with. But if you compare that to nursing care in a hospital for the same type of care, the savings would be phenomenal. But at the same time, it's the quality of care that is the benefit of it.
Thank you, Councillor. No further questions. Joanne, thank you very much.
Thank you.
So with that, Council, all in favor? That is unanimous. Thank you. Item number 1, Councillor Beauregard.
Motion by Councillor Beauregard regarding request for endorsement of Bill 164, Protecting Vulnerable Persons in Support of Living Accommodation Act 2019.
Can I get a seconder for this? Councillor Desmarais. Councillor Beauregard.
Through your worship to Council, I am bringing forward this bill in hopes that this bill gets the attention that it deserves. This bill comes from MPP, Niagara Centre MPP Jeff Birch, and I bring this forward in order to give it the attention that it deserves, as I just said. Now, this bill, I'll just give you a short description of its explanatory note. So the bill requires persons who operate a supportive living accommodation in specified circumstances to hold a license issued by the minister. It provides for a framework to be supplemented by regulations governing applications for and the issuance of license, the obligations of persons who operate a supportive living accommodation under the authority of a license, inspections, and complaints. This is a topic that has come to our council and has been discussed previously. Instead of looking at the municipal level, this takes it to the provincial level, where, in my opinion, is where it belongs. There are other acts that the province is involved in and have passed that are similar to this one. So I'm asking that we move this in order to give it the attention that it deserves.
Thank you, Councillor. Any further questions? Councillor Desmarais.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you, I would actually like to agree with everything Councillor Beauregard has said and remind Council that we've had some pretty extreme issues that have faced us in the past due to supportive living establishments in our city. And this bill will go a long way to relieving municipalities of the burden of trying to deal with those things. Councillor Beauregard, you couldn't have been more right. This belongs at the provincial level. There's no question. That's where the licensing belongs, and this is a necessary thing. So I would hope that we would all be supporting this and moving forward, knowing that this is the kind of support that we have to have out there. We have to share this with all the other municipalities so that there's enough force put behind it that it becomes law and the provinces takes on their duty of taking care of this problem.
Great. Thank you, Councillor. Any more questions or comments? Councillor Baggy.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Maybe Councillor Beauregard can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think this is the same bill that our former MVP, Cindy Forrester, brought up in 2017, I think, to the Ontario Legislature, and it was prorogued, if I'm not mistaken. Is that correct?
Yes.
Councillor?
Through your worship, I'm not sure of that, but judging by our colleague Councillor Desmarais, she says yes. So I guess so.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. I fully support it.
Thank you, Councillor. Any further questions or comments? All in favor? That's carried unanimously. Thank you. Item number 3, Councillor Danch.
Chief Administrative Officer Report 2020-10, subject revised logo and branding update.
Seconder to this, Councillor Bruno. Councillor Danch. We do have staff here. Do you want to hear from them first?
I see her, but she doesn't have to come up to the podium. I just, a bit of opinion and just a cost question. I see the cost of this was, in the $12,000 range for the branding and more than just uniforms and whatnot. I just, I like our current logo. I think it looks better than some that we've had in the past. I'm not huge on what I see. Is this like the Appendix A and B? Is that what we're looking at promoting now, Michelle? Or
Appendix A is what our...
Oh, Michelle, you want to come to the podium, please? Thank you.
Through you, Your Worship, to Councillor Danch. Appendix A is what our branding currently is. That was put in place in 2004. You can see there was an actual approval of 3 variations of the logo, plus what the Sugarloaf Marina logo is. Implementation has been difficult due to the different fonts that have been put in place and different colors for the 1 tone and the 2. Appendix B in your package is what is being proposed as the new logo, which would be the same logo used across the municipality for consistency and continuity.
okay, so and I'm looking at it here, and I still like the old one better. But anyways, one thing about branding or logos, and if you look at some of the big players in the game, Under Armour, Adidas, Helly Hansen, haven't changed. They're consistent. And not to bring myself up, but I've been running the same one for 25 years. You see that, you recognize it, and that's really what I wanted to just say is that you like to see the same thing going on. Am I going to buy a new shirt next year? Maybe I will if I need one. It'll have the new logo. That's fine. But I do like the old one better just from looking at this. That's only I really wanted to say.
Thank you, Councillor. Any further questions or comments? Councillor Bruno.
Thank you, Worship. I want to commend Michelle for bringing this forward. I remember back in the day when we had everybody and his brother who came up with their own logo or their version of it, but we still do on the salutation on a lot of emails and things like that, and I think that's all going to get right-sized. I commend the idea that it was always time to be looked at and to get to consistency. I agree with Councillor Danch. We'll just say it. I'm not in favor of Appendix B and that particular logo. What I am in favor of from B is the concept of, if you look in B, where it's a division of the city. So if you look at B, you have the library puts their salutation underneath the main logo. So everybody who is the marina ops, something we're doing, initiative, putting that under there, I think maintains what you want in a logo, and that is consistency, brand recognition. Personally, from what I hear from people around Niagara, I think it's the best looking logo of all of them with the ship there. I also think that this is more than the logo for the corporation. It's the logo that people identify with. And I would have hoped that there would have been some public review of this and the thoughts of the public on the options. I don't think that I or we necessarily have all the answers, so I would have liked to seen public input either pre, but particularly post, bringing it down to some options. So, and the other, so I haven't really given the definitive motion here, but the other thing that I wanted to ask you, Michelle, is I've been struck by a couple of the, and I've mentioned this to you and some councillors, the parks logo when some of our sandblasted wood signs have been done. And is that a conversation for another day, or is this the appropriate time to deal with that?
So that, through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Bruno, that is all through part of this. So the issue that we're currently having is the logos that were identified in Appendix A, all that we as staff were ever provided were logos. We were not provided guidelines on how those logos were to be implemented throughout the corporation. So when corporate communications was identified as a position approximately 2 years ago, this has been the goal to create guidelines on how and when our logos are going to be implemented throughout the corporation, what colors are going to be used, what font is going to be used, and how that be implemented, more than just park signs, but on our clothing, on our letterhead, on our business cards. As an example, staff are currently using a variety of business cards. So it is to regulate how our brand is being used, and it's for that identity. When somebody's looking at something, they know that it is the corporation's. To speak further to Councillor Danch's point about the consistency of a logo and its use, that's reason why structure was kept very similar, in that the ship's wheel and the caps of the logo was to represent that similarity, what our logo has always been as that identifier. The only change to the logo is the actual vessel itself, which is to be more ambiguous and to represent a lot of what we currently are as a municipality, which represents Lakers or international salties or pleasure crafts at our marina or cruise ships that are now frequenting our canal. So it's more identifiable across the city as to what we represent rather than a singular tall ship.
Okay. So just on that, I'd like to bring forward that we stick with the schooner in the ship's wheel. I would like to see that where departments want to use that, again, back to the Port Colborne Public Library underneath, that we could use our current logo, but everybody and their brother can use the space underneath. It reminded me of when you see, and it's gone through to Councillor Danch's point too, if you look at the Canada logo on any letterhead of the Government of Canada, it has the flag, but it may be something different next to it, right? So there's that consistency, and then it might say, I don't know, Health Canada or Revenue Canada or all that, where those two tie together. So I like the tie-in in B, but I like our traditional logo and the compliments we've heard on it. So I don't know if you need that, Mr. Mayor, in a motion. I'll let others speak. On the sign issue.
Councillor, it's an amended motion, so if you want to put an amendment on the floor, I would ask you to do it this time.
Yes. That we stick with our traditional schooner logo, which would be, I guess, the top right in Appendix A, and use the where departments want to use their specific venue, public library, Vale Health and Wellness, that kind of goes underneath as you've shown in B. In fact, you do have Vale there, and you do have the public library there. On the other issue of signage, I guess whether it's now or in the future, would ask, before we make a decision, councillors look at this particular signage that we have all around our parks, which is the blue background with the sandblasted white logo in it and the words that are all our parks. And now if you look at Lock 8 Park, you will see the implementation of it just being on a black and white straight base background, which to me frankly looks like any sign anywhere in the world. Almost like a Department of Highway sign in my view. But again, that's just my view. Again, so if it's relevant here, I'd like maybe perhaps time for councillor if they want to look around and see if our traditional sandblasted signs look good, or they want to go with the one that is now at Lock 8. But I'll leave that for other people to comment on whether they want to deal with that part of this right now. But for now, I'll put forward that amendment. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
So the amendment you're asking for is to stick with the current logo, which if you show as Appendix A, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. There's 12 logos here. Which logo, Councillor?
Top right.
You want to stick with the top right logo as the only logo. Where each department is using the logo, they would put their wording as you stated on Appendix B, where it shows the Port Colborne Public Library or the Port Colborne Valley Health and Wellness Center.
Yes.
Okay. So Councillor Bruno, I'm going to not accept your amendment because the clerk says we must defeat this and then bring forward a motion. So we'll start with that, but I'll take comments before we do anything with that. Councillor Baggy.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I thought I had a fat finger to push that button. One question maybe to Michelle. Estimated cost at 2020 budget for the transition. Like, I hate to wait till February, March, or April when I get a budget. And if we want to approve something before I know a cost, I don't really like to do that.
Definitely through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Bagu. The cost, so a lot of the implementation of our guidelines, the design of what we're going to be doing has already been developed in through the municipal modernization program in that $12,000 that we've already budgeted for. The implementation is what's going to be integrated primarily into mid to late 2021 through our operating budget. So as we're replacing signs, a lot of our signs are needing replacements and they're already through our operating budget. We already have our regular administrative operating budgets where we're continuously already replacing our envelopes and stationery, so it's all going to be integrated into our operating budget is the goal.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Mayor. One other thing, it's the report also stated that it's too late to investigate alternate logos, which options, and I would have sort of wished this would have came back a little bit earlier, so we could have talked about it. The Councillor Bruno's change, which I do like, which I do agree with them, and I do agree with them also that I'd like to see the community get involved in something to do with our city. A lot of these kids here, they have great ideas. We have great pensioners here, probably artists all over the place. And just to get the people participating in our community, which I really like to see. And let them have a say. They can vote online. We had votes before on our city's website. And just to keep that in mind for next time for something else. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Desmarais.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to Michelle. Michelle, thanks for bringing this forward tonight. I'm going to agree with Gary on this, though. I think that the older logo is the better way to go. It's far more attractive in any case to me. But I did want to hear more about your comment about the fonts not working well, because that may be pivotal here. So,
Michelle?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Demery, thank you for bringing that up, and that is an item to take in consideration if still wanting to go with our schooner or tall ship, or however, the font of Port Colborne itself that we're currently using, we are having the logo redrawn, but because it was originally designed in 2004 and implementation, the font is not meeting a lot of our accessibility standards that are now in place, and so it is very thin. As we're putting it in certain, now with the transition in 2004, it didn't exist of our social media. It's very difficult when we're transitioning it. It's difficult to read. So the new font that's chosen, and the fonts in general that have been chosen for two reasons. Number one, to meet our accessibility standards, AOTA, as put out by the government. And number two, we were choosing Google Fonts, as outlined in the report, and through the Municipal Modernization Program, we are also doing a website redesign. So we are doing Google Fonts, which will also be implemented into all staff's computers for Word documents. So there is consistency in terms of our text, but also in terms of accessibility standards.
Councillor?
Thank you again, Mr. Mayor, again through you. So, Michelle, I guess what we really need to know is how would the newer font work with the older logo? Because I don't see a match now. The old font works very well, but the new font may not at all. I don't think that's going to look very good. So let's hear about that.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Demery. I do have versions that I can circulate where we did create an updated version of our current logo. So I do have versions that I can circulate for council's consideration. However, that's being said, the logo, which is our current one, that has been modernized, is still in the blue color scheme and not in the sunset colors that are originally identified as what Councillor Bruno would like to see for our logo. The reason primarily of choosing this navy blue and moving forward with that is, Councillor Bruno, you've identified yourself in the park sign. A lot of everything that we're doing across the municipality and branding ourselves without a brand guideline is utilizing the color blue. Yet our logo is not representative of that. And so in order, when we talk about consistency and identity and being recognizable across the corporation, I think we really need to consider what color and what we think represents us, because that's also our brand. And so if we're wanting our signage and a lot of things throughout the corporation that we're doing to be in line with our brand, then we have to see if whether adopting blue is a color that we're still wanting to go with rather than the sunset that's been used.
Okay, Councillor?
I was just thinking maybe we need to go back to the drawing board on this and give it another think before we try to make a decision tonight.
Okay, Councillor Bodnar?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think Michelle just answered it, but so Appendix B, just because everything's blue and there's no color in it, that was meant to be that way. Right?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Broad, correct. It is meant to be blue on its own, the subcolor being the orange drawn from our current logos, which we typically have pulled out. So the sunset consists of orange, red, and yellow. Traditionally trying to pull one of those colors out to use in our branding, which we've been trying to work with. So if you see our leisure guide, the participate branding, it's all through the use of orange. So that's what has been transcended to try and keep that historic element of our previous logos into the sub-identifiers. So the Public Library, Engineering and Operations Center, Valley Health and Wellness Center will also be orange. That is how we're connecting that in. And the blue, which is that sub, is a good balancing color to the navy blue, and that blue is actually the blue that we've drawn out of the Canal Days logo to connect our two brands. If you remember, for our 40th anniversary of Canal Days, we did a rebrand, and so that blue is with that branding so that they complement one another.
Okay. I think, like Angie's idea of maybe bring us back, show us a picture of what that font's going to look like and other options rather than just maybe defeat this whole thing tonight, just send it back to staff or something. But I'll wait to hear from other people on that one. Thank you.
I'll give you some latitude. Councillor Beauregard.
Through your worship to Michelle, I think I might be the only councillor here that thinks that this is actually, I like the design on Appendix B. I think it's, like he says in the report, it is realistic of the ships that do come through our canal. I, however, do share some similar thoughts as other councillors in terms of the sunset look on the old logo. somehow we can incorporate it in here. I would like to see a picture of that at least to see how that's incorporated. But to me, this looks like a modern day approach, and I like it.
I like it. Okay, no further questions. Councillor Bodnar, I heard the connotation to refer back to staff. Do you want to put that forward?
I would be happy to do that, Mr. Mayor, if that's okay with other councillors.
Okay, so Councillor Bodnar wants to refer this back to staff. Can I get a seconder to get it on the table? Councillor Bagu. So timeline, Michelle, timeline if we refer this back this evening?
Mr. Mayor, I would have it for the next council meeting, as I already have an example of what I think council would be looking for.
Okay, if you want to send that out in the meantime, that'd probably be a good idea. So this is going to be referred to the next council meeting with further ideas from staff with regards to what was discussed here this evening. Michelle, you have an understanding of what we're looking for?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. There is no debate, but any questions? Okay, all those in favor? All those opposed? That's carried unanimously. Thank you to staff, thank you, council. Item 4 is Councillor Bodnar. It's not on yet.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Item 4, Planning and Development Department Bylaw Enforcement Division, Report 2020-05, subject update with respect to council's requests for proactive enforcement.
Seconder for that? Councillor Bruno, Councillor Bodnar.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I see our bylaw leader is here, Sherry. So, Sherry, I pulled this because I know this is to be referred to budget, but I don't think we may have the audience at budget that we might have here on, film. And so I just really wanted to highlight this because we often talk about doing things and getting at things and that, which is a really good idea, but it comes with a real cost. And this has got a real cost to it. So I wonder if, I know you got a cold, Sherry, but I wonder if you could actually outline some of the costs in here of what we'll be asking for in budget, and then people will know what we're dealing with.
So, Sheriff, you can give us a full overview of those costs, be appreciative. Thank you.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Bodnar and the rest of council with regards to this report. Council requested information with regards to bylaw being able to do proactive enforcement in a timely manner. With the number of complaints that bylaw has, the number of staff that they have, the hours involved in doing the complaints in a timely manner, there's more complaint hours than there are staff. Therefore, I've presented a report with financial costs to try and resolve the issue that council is requesting. You have a full-time officer plus benefits at $68,614. A 2020 all-wheel drive vehicle similar to the all-wheel drive vehicles that Bylaw has now is $35,000. Office space, which can be reduced depending on the availability of space and desks that we have available in the office, is about $10,000. Office supplies, books, notes, postage, business cards, $1,500. Cellular device and required applications, phone, the WAP program, which is the Work Alone program, GPS on the vehicles and the cellular monthly bills, and the GPS bill for the vehicles is $3,000. PPE, which is personal protective equipment, vests, boots, coats, pants, $1,000. And training, which is OAPSO, Ontario Association of Property Standards Officers, tactful communication, mandatory safety training, mileage, etc., is approximately $2,000, with a total cost of $121,114.
Okay, Councillor?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. While I think this can be a good idea, there is a cost to it, and that's yearly, except backing out the car which is kind of a one-time plus expenses, but so it'll be interesting at budget time to see where we're at with this. It's something that Bylaw could really use. There's lots of people that are wondering why we can't get at certain things, and I think Sherry said it very well. The hours are just more than the bodies that are there to do it, and it takes so much more time than anybody, unless they were involved in it, could ever imagine for what you think might be a simple thing to go out and talk to somebody, but nothing simple in Bylaw. And I just wanted to highlight this with the costs that we're going to be dealing with at budget time. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Bruno?
Thank you, Worship. I think all of us have at one time or another wished there was more proactiveness in our bylaw enforcement, and Councillor Bodner is absolutely right. That often can come at a cost. Just to not elongate the debate on this, I'm wondering if, because this is a budget item, in the current recommendation, or perhaps I should just make another comment before the recommendation. I think there's many ways to do proactive enforcement, and it depends on whether you want it full throttle or not. And so the question becomes, is it the summer student first? Is it and then the other? I mean, there's various iterations of how fast you want to go. And so I think that is a budget implementation. I'm really interested in what I hear about the fine issue. If you could speak to it being done, I think, is it now through the possibility is through the Niagara region or other municipalities have engaged in a new format of fines and their collection. So I wonder if you could speak to that, and if there's any experience that others have had across Ontario that's done it, whether it's alleviated time pressures on the current system. Can that buy some time? Because I think this does come down to we'll want more, but at what cost and how fast?
Sure.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Bruno and the rest of council. We started out with Bylaw, and then we requested a summer student so that we could do the grass complaints and do some repeat offenders on the grass complaints. What this is looking at now is the next stepped up approach of getting another full-time officer to deal with all the complaints, as well as be able to deal with other issues that council has brought forward. The issues in the report that I talk about is called the AMPS program, the Administrative Monetary Penalty System. The Administrative Monetary Penalty System is a fine system that, instead of getting a Part 1 ticket that you would go to court, to provincial court, so say, for example, you built a fence in an inappropriate height, you would be able to get a Part 1 ticket, you would be fined, you would have to pay the fine through the provincial court. If you didn't pay the fine, then the provincial court would go after you with regards to getting that fee, and then those monies would go into a pot. That pot would then be split between the region and the 12 municipalities. We would get a percentage. With the AMPS program is basically a notice fine that you would get. So again, same scenario, you built a fence in an inappropriate height, we would issue an AMPS notice, basically a fine. That would then be levied to you. If you failed to pay it, we would add it to your taxes. The municipality would then collect 100% of the fee, either through you or through taxes. The scenario with this is that if we would be going out and dealing with situations where people were violating certain bylaws, rules, and regulations, this is an incentive for people to comply with the rules and regulations that council has set out and curb them to not do certain things, so that when we're working forward, that we don't have to go clean up properties, that if we issued a couple of fines, these people would not then get to an area where they would have their property in total disrepair or violate multiple bylaws or violate them on a regular basis. So this is the area and the next step of what we're looking forward to. So if we implement the AMPS, implement another officer, move forward in a stepped-up, baby step approach, I think this is the approach that council is looking for to get the desired result.
Councillor?
Thank you, Worship. Then I'd just like to bring forward, and I'm not sure if this is where Councillor Bodner was going, because half of this recommendation deals with the dollar amount, which could go to budget. I'm wondering if we could go with the council approve the implementation of a stepped-up approach, complaints in a timely manner, monitor historical properties and repeat offenders for 220, and deal with the appropriateness of what dollar amount at budget. Full stop in the recommendation. So we'll have these costs brought to budget, but I would like to move the ball forward in that are we or are we not for proactive enforcement, for which at least I put my hand up and would like to see that ball started.
So, Councillor, we can certainly do that, but if you do the stepped-up approach, but at budget you turn down the full-time enforcement officer,
Well, it may not be.
Can staff?
It may be 6 months, it may be not full-time, it could be various versions of, sorry.
Yeah.
Should be, it could be various versions of that 100 and some odd thousand. It may start in June.
So what you're looking at is that staff come back at budget with regards to the hiring time and the cost going forward for 2020, and then obviously we would know what the full year costs would be moving forward to 2021 and beyond.
Yes. But I'd like to get the principle of that we're for proactive, and we want to bring that to budget.
Madam Clerk, should we do that as an amendment? Yep.
Through the mayor, Councillor Bruno, just clarification that you would like to remove everything after for 2020 in the first paragraph, and then keep the second paragraph.
Correct.
So the second paragraph would have staff giving us the 2020 costs and the 2021 costs moving forward.
Right.
That would have to come through with budget.
Correct.
Because they may not hire this person till June 1st, and obviously you're only going to pay them 6 months this year. Just so at the budget you know. However, also knowing that next year's budget
Would be a full year.
be a full year, and really next year's budget we would be adding in the other 50% because 50% would already be there.
I mean, we've done that with the role of customer service at the front counter.
Correct.
And we've done that with the intake person too, I believe.
Okay, can I get a seconder for the amendment? Councillor Bodner. Councillor Bodner, you had a question? To the amendment.
Yes, yes. So while I'm for it, I'm just wondering whether this isn't what Gary's talking about. Shouldn't be another report coming back from staff giving us some clear outlines on that and what we expect them to do. And then just pass this one and ask for another report, just so there isn't anything in it that's, that's kind of where I'm thinking anyways. But I'm kind of okay with Gary's thought process, but just throw that out there for
Councillor Wells.
Thank you, Your Mayor. Through you to Sherry. The report, one question.
Is this on the amendment, though? Got to deal with the amendment, sorry. Okay, so I'll come back to you on that?
Yep.
Basically to the amendment? Sherry.
Just to clarify, the same situation we discussed with the bylaw intake officer is this is the total amount. When it comes to budget time in the budget process, we put in the full amount, and then if we're not hiring the person for the half of the year, which we did with the bylaw intake, the treasurer puts it in and shows that amount, half the amount in the budget. This is just advising of what the full amount would be, but when it goes to the budget process will have the figures in there, because we probably wouldn't hire this person until June, which would only put half the amount in for that year.
So they're already going to do that?
That's fine. I mean, if that's the way it is, but I saw it as and hire one. So Councillor Bodnar led off with the idea that this is a hefty amount and should be talked about in budget, which I fully concur with. Having said that, I thought then it's appropriate to deal with the money side of that issue at budget. And that may change because of timeline, the volume of this, the number of people, et cetera, et cetera. And we have the background, and I don't need another report. I just want to get the principle established if we're all for it. Because if the principle isn't established, it isn't at budget.
So, I mean, we do have an amendment on the floor, which we should, and then, and based on what I just heard, we should defeat that. Because really what you want to do is stop at 2020, and then you want to say, and the hiring of one full-time enforcement officer and one additional summer student, and purchase one additional all-wheel drive vehicle and other miscellaneous materials to support and house the new staff be referred to budget.
Yeah.
Really is what you want.
Yeah.
So if we can defeat, because unless you want to withdraw your First Amendment, you can withdraw it.
I don't mind doing that if that's the understanding around the table.
No, because then, no, that we can bring another one to add a couple of, basically what I said. Just tightens it up for what you want. And I think it's better.
With your comment.
So you're going to
Your last
withdraw that,
comment.
Councillor Bodnar, is that fine, he's withdrawing that? So Madam, so Councillor Bruno, if you can move an amendment by basically stating, and the hiring of one full-time enforcement, blah, 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 be referred to the budget process.
Fine.
Okay, Councillor Bodnar, are you fine with that?
Yep.
You fine with that, Madam Clerk? Okay, so we're going to, this is on the amendment. Any questions to that? All those in favor of the amendment? Opposed? It's carried unanimously. Now, to the recommendation as amended, Councillor Wells.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you again to Sherry. In regards to the AMPS program, will the AMPS program be applied consistently across all areas? I know you mentioned parking, an AMPS policy regarding parking is being worked on, but will you have to do that with every bylaw that we have?
Sherry?
Currently, through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Wells and the rest of council, currently we already have an AMPS parking bylaw. This would be an AMPS non-parking, which would be for the variety of different bylaws such as fences, lot maintenance, property standards, snow removal. Those are the types of ones that we can implement and bring forward and fine people based on that. And then you would also have the screening and hearing situation just like you do for the parking. It would be for the non-parking AMPS as well.
Councillor?
Thank you. A further question on this one here. In your report, you identified the number of complaints that you currently are processing or in process. Is there any breakdown on those complaints to categorization, repeat, non-repeat, so that we can get a sort of an understanding of whether we're seeing the same complaint from the same party 10 times and the complaint not being addressed, or whether we can see that the complaint is a repeat issue. So again, we can take a look at it. So those 700 complaints may actually only be 150, for example, if they're all on the same basis.
Sure.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, through to Councillor Wells and the rest of council, if you recall in the December 9th, 2019 192 report, Department of Planning and Development Activity Report, it broke down all the complaints that we had by ward, by individual complaints, and by the type of complaint. So for example, in 2019, from January to October at that time, there was 149 grass complaints, 130 lot maintenance complaints, 108 parking complaints, 100 parking interfering with snow removal complaints, and 54 property standards complaints. And that was just for the 10-month period. Based on that report, we had a variety of different categories that we have, and we do have repeat offenders. I can get that information for you as the number of repeat offenders that we have, but we had 817 complaints this year, and if I had to ballpark, I'd probably ballpark that there were 50 repeat complaint offenders. The parking ones and the, again, lot maintenance and grass take up about 400 of those complaints, and the rest are miscellaneous in between there.
Councillor?
Okay, thank you. And again, from that, like, when I look at that and I see that breakdown that you just described, that initial first breakdown, you gave me 4 categories of those types of breakdowns. So when your time analysis for those individuals, to me, it represented you applied the same time frame to a complaint, depending on whether it's complex or non-complex. And then, so if you were to take a look at that, if you were doing the same one repetitively a number of times, you wouldn't have to do the same historical checkup. You wouldn't have, there might be time savings on those. So I'm just looking at that time analysis.
Thank you, Councillor. Sure.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Wells and the rest of council. We have to do that check each and every time because of the change of ownership, dealing with irate owners, problem properties, ensuring officer safety to make sure that they're going to an area where if they need backup, that type of issue or situation. So we do a check every single time to make sure that we are going to a property and we know what we're walking into. But you could have a property and you can deal with it, and it could be a 4-hour turnaround. You could go there the next time and it might take 12 because the individual's home and they want to deal and discuss an issue with you. The next time you go, it could be 30 minutes. So this is an average of what we've figured out on how the time frames would work and how much time is spent by the officers.
Councillor?
Thank you, Mayor. Just one more question. I see what you're proposing here is a transition from a complaint-driven process to somewhat of a proactive process. And on the in-between, you have what you refer to as a step-up category. This transition here implies that you have a base level of complaints, that you have a base level of staff that are managing those complaints. And then you're introducing more staff to handle basically an overload or an extension of those complaints. And then eventually we get to a proactive program, which is a full proactive program. But the concern I have right now is that once we transition from a complaint program to a proactive program, we would definitely see some sort of transition of those employees. Now, whether they're going to be stuck on the complaint side or they're going to be onto the proactive side. So the staffing, I would see there should be some form of transition for those employees, or will they be transitioned into the proactive side as the complaints drop off and proactivity increases? And then following just from that, Sherry, we have a number of examples of proactive programs, such as the smoke alarm program that the fire department say. So being proactive is a far better way to deal with issues rather than being complaint driven. And there's been proven facts to that. So the transition, I think, is very important, and I think what we're doing here is very important to get to a proactive, and so it's just a matter of how we do that transition.
Okay.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Wells and the rest of council. The situation you're discussing is we're still doing complaints and looking at going to proactive and doing a stepped-up approach. The officers, and you see in the report, what I talk about is a sample schedule. With 3 officers, they would be working 7 days a week. So, for example, an officer would have Sunday and Monday off and work Tuesday to Saturday. That officer would, where I'm looking at and I'm thinking out loud is that one day a week that officer would do proactive, and the rest of the time he would be doing and dealing with his complaints. Each and every officer of those 3 would be doing the exact same thing with 2 days off, so that there'd always be 2 officers working through a 7-day period. So the bylaw intake person would be dealing with all their paperwork, dealing with all the complaints coming in, and dealing with the front counter. I don't see where there's going to be an issue that the officers, or we're going to run out of stuff for the officers to do, because we will be dealing with issuing fines through the AMP process. We will be looking at and dealing with the cleanup of properties, dealing with the complaints from people and having conversations with people in that respect. And the bylaw intake person would be dealing with the paperwork for all 3 officers. I hope that answers your question.
Thank you, Sherry. Councillor?
Thank you.
Thank you. Any further questions? Councillor Baggy.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The intake officer right now, I think, is shared with the planning department, if I'm not mistaken.
Sherry?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Bagu. The bylaw intake officer is a new position that was created last year. Originally, it was shared with building, and we had part of building, but with the influx in complaints and the influx in building permits, we separated those two. We had a individual in that position for about a 6-month period until she got promoted internally. And we had to advertise and rehire, and the new person starts on Monday. So we will have that person back, and that person is the front counter person of the 2nd floor to deal with all the people walking into the front counter to get the customer service of a person they need, whether it be sending them over to building, getting somebody from community services, or dealing with them, as well as all the bylaw complaints that come in on the front counter and over the phone.
So if we go proactive on a weekend, you're going to have a intake officer there also?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, the proactive, they will be able to, as they do now when they're working their summer schedule, they drop off the paperwork on Friday. The intake officer has all their paperwork done on the Monday, and we have it as a process of how we've regulated it, so we know how we can get all our paperwork done, as well as the officers are quite capable, if need be, to send out some information. But because the post office and what we have to do is done by registered mail or by express post, we have to use the post office, so that's done through Monday to Friday.
Okay. Just a comment, I see on one of the papers that the town of Fort Erie has the same amount of people, but they handle about 100 more complaints a year than the city of Colborne does. And they seem to do okay, that's just a comment. So I'm not quite sure, I'm convinced that when I call Bylaw, because somebody's parked in front of Luigi's barber shop, which I complained here a couple times before, in the truck unloading zone, whether I'm going to get a Bylaw officer down there in 10 or 15 minutes, I don't think it's still going to happen, even if I give you $200,000. I think you're going to be looking at grass cutting out in Ward 4 or something like that, where they don't cut the grass. But that's just another comment. So I'm not really in favor of going a little bit more proactive. I do like the complaint system. I file 5, 6, 7 complaints myself on behalf of constituents and myself also. I do both. I have no problem filing a complaint for anybody. But and I have no problem with the response time of your bylaw department. But I do question, maybe there is some sort of maybe more efficiencies we could do in the bylaw department to look at that first, or if it's been looked at 100% already, Mr. CAO probably know that, but if that's already been looked at, then I'll look at this again.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Bodner?
Yes, sir, just a comment, and what's wrong with bylaw being out in Ward 4? I think it's a darn good idea.
That's right.
So just a comment on, Sherry, if you do find anybody with bylaw people with time on their hands, you can send them down to Pleasant Beach Road from June till September. I think you got that on the board in big print anyways.
Yes, we
but
do.
One of the really good things about this, if we do get to it, is that we could have 2 officers working on weekends. And with our, especially in the summer, with our, all the things we do here and the influx of people in that. So that would be a good thing in all this.
Thank you, Councillor. Any other questions? Seeing none, all in favor? Opposed? That's carried. And we did note Councillor Beauregard's conflict with that. Item number 6, Councillor Bodner.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Planning and Development Department, Planning Division, Report 2020-09, subject. Recommendation report for official plan and zoning bylaw amendment for cannabis production facility.
Thank you, Councillor. Can I get a seconder to this? Councillor Desmarais. Councillor Bodnar.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to Dan, I think that's... So I'm just anticipating some questions from people and just past history. I know the answer to some, but I'd like you to kind of tell us. So in here, there's different regulations and setbacks and everything, but so one of the questions are going to be, well, can't we just ban them? Can't we just say none? So I've had that question directed to me, so I wonder whether you could comment on our ability to just say no production facilities. Is that a possibility?
Dan?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Bodnar, the fact that the federal government regulates medical marijuana, the province of Ontario, they deal with cannabis sales. That would be something I wouldn't recommend council do. If that is the angle you want to go down, I would then propose that have an application be brought forward if someone wants to actually propose cannabis. But to outright prohibit it, that wouldn't be something I could recommend.
Councillor?
Thank you, Dan. I agree with you on that, by the way, because I think it just get us into all kinds of stuff. So in here also is that we're going to allow outdoor growing of marijuana. Can you comment on why why we're going to allow that?
Dan?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Bodnar, you recall in the original draft, I had proposed that no outdoor growing of cannabis be permitted. The comments I got back from the region of Niagara was that that would be something that would not be supportable because in the regional policy plan, it's considered an agricultural use. The Ministry of Agricultural and Rural Affairs as well determines that to be an agricultural use. The one thing I did recommend though, because in the urban area, agricultural use is not permitted, I did have in there that someone proposing a cannabis facility can't grow that outdoors.
Councillor?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And the last one I have, does any of this deal with the growing that's happening right now in the gas line area? I think you know the one we're talking about that we've been dealing with for a number of years. Anything in here affect that?
Dan?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Bonner, that use is a non-conforming use. We cannot deal with that use. It's there, it's legally there, based on the fact of the date that it actually was in place. It's a non-conforming use.
Okay.
That's all I have, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor. Questions? Councillor Wells.
Thank you, Mayor. Through you to Dan. On page 45 of our package, this is just for some technical clarification for me, if you will. You talk about air treatment control means the fundamental use of industrial grade multi-stage carbon filtration system or similar technology. That technology refers to a filtration technology. There are other technologies that are out there that are, the only similarity is that they destroy odor. Some are catalytic converting technologies, some are thermal technologies. I was just wondering if we could take a look at changing that word similar, changing that around a little bit to alternatively proven technologies. Just so that there's no wiggle room in there for that.
Through Mr. Mayor to Councillor Wells, I have no issue with that. That was a definition that was taken from Norfolk County. So if the council wants to make an amendment to the actual definition to refer to that advanced technology, I have no issue with that.
Thank you, Dan. So Councillor, if we can put that through as an amendment, if you just repeat it for the clerk.
I would, there would be another amendment in wording on this same page, so if I can.
Okay, yeah, if you want to
include
bundle
all.
them together, yeah, definitely.
Yeah, that would be easier,
Definitely.
I think.
Go ahead.
On the bottom of the same page, in 2.94, you were, again, in here, you state a building or structure used for security purposes. If they combine the security purposes with some of the other purposes of the buildings that they would have on their facility, they could use that as a means to eliminate that minimum setback on the front. So what I would suggest that we use that a building or structure used solely for security purposes for cannabis production. Again, just to tighten it up a little bit, Dan.
Dan, is that fine?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Wells, I have no issue with that.
Okay.
So,
Councillor?
My amendment would be to substitute in the air treatment control means paragraph in there for that. The air treatment control means the functional use of industrial grade multi-stage carbon filtration systems or similarly or alternatively proven technologies to reduce and or treat the emissions of pollen, dust, and odors expelled from the facility.
Just take an alternative leave.
You're fine with that? Okay. And then
Okay.
secondly?
And then the second amendment would be in section 2.94. Notwithstanding any other provision of this bylaw, a building or structurally used solely for security purposes for cannabis production be put in there in that place.
Okay.
Okay.
Yep. Okay, so Councillor Demery will second the amendment. Any questions to the amendment only? Nothing to the amendment. All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Okay, Councillor?
One more question.
Yep.
This is in regards to the identification of the 150 meters through you to Dan versus 300 meters. I believe that the selection, the reason why you went with 150 meters was because the industry was identified as a Class 2, similar to a Class 2 in the ministry's D6 guidelines. I would just ask for clarification on that because I see the industry as it stands now more really coming closer to a Class 3 with a lot of historical evidence pointing to emissions from the site by light and by odor. So these are things that we read about now. We see that it happens now. So I would tend to ask the question of why it wasn't compared to a Class 3.
Dan?
Through Mr. Mayor to Councillor Wells and all the council, that is the same setback that I had proposed in the medical marijuana facility, and it's the same setback that's proposed by other municipalities throughout the province, and they refer to that as a Class 2 facility. And one of the reasons for the Class 2 was because it could be possible longer hours of operations. It's not like your typical, it may run 24/7. So that's why I went with the Class 2, just based on the standards and comparisons with other municipalities.
Thank you. Just to clarify what Councillor Wells is talking about, because this is in an entirely closed building, the issues going on in Pelham with the greenhouses, which is light and smell predominantly there, this being in reality is a building within a building, and based on the new rules coming out from the federal government, my understanding is that the lighting issue, aside from their outside lighting, it'll alleviate us from the powerful high beams that you see now, correct?
Yep. Through Mr. Mayor, one of the things that I put in the draft for council's consideration, if it is a greenhouse that is growing it, it needs to be shaded so there's no light that is going to be emitted outside of the building. If it's a building for cannabis in the industrial area within the urban area boundary, it can't be a greenhouse. It has to be an actual industrial building. So there'd be no light emitted from it. You would have now the carbon filters that would control the odor. And so that's what I believe that council has before them would alleviate the issues that we're seeing elsewhere.
So Dan, with that, and what Councillor Wells was talking about, can we eliminate greenhouses altogether? Are we allowed to do that?
Mr. Mayor, the fact that a greenhouse is an agricultural use, I would steer away from prohibiting them for cannabis growth. Okay. It is an agricultural use.
Thank you. Further questions? No further questions. Voting on the motion as it was amended. All those in favor? All those opposed? That's carried. Thank you, Council, and thank you, Dan. Item 7's done. Item 8. You're taking this one?
8 was lifted?
Oh, 8 wasn't lifted? Oh, sorry. I apologize. 9 is done? Okay, yes, we're done. I apologize. I had it circled in case it was, because Julian was here. Okay, Council, any notices of motion? Starting off my right, any notices of motion? Off to my left, seeing none. This meeting is now adjourned. We go on to our council meeting. I'll call this meeting to order. Introduction of addendum items, Madam Clerk.
There are no addendum items this evening.
Thank you. Confirmation of agenda, mover and a seconder. Councillor Wells, Councillor Bagu. Any questions? All in favor? Carried unanimously. Any disclosures of interest? Councillor Beauregard, item 4, Councillor? Yes. Okay. Beauregard, conflict. Thank you, Councillor. Any others? Adoption of minutes, we have 2. I'll do these in blocks. Special meeting of Council 01-20 held on January 13th, 2020. Regular meeting of Council 02-20 held on January 13th, 2020. Mover and a seconder. Councillor Bodner, Councillor Wells. Any questions on either of those minutes? All those in favor? That's carried unanimously. Items requiring a separate discussion. If I can have somebody bring item 4. Bodner, Councillor Bodner. Any other items to need to be drawn? Okay. All those in favor of all the other items? Or, sorry, mover to approve all the other items. Mover is Councillor Wells. Councillor Bagu, any questions? All those in favor? That's carried unanimously. Consideration of items requiring separate discussion. Again, for Councillor Beauregard's conflict. Item number 4, Councillor Bodner.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Planning and Development Department Bylaw Enforcement Division Report 2020-05. Subject update with respect to Council's requests for proactive enforcement.
Councillor Clayla, you'll second that? Thank you, Councillor. Any questions? All in favor? That's unanimous. Thank you. Proclamations, there are none. We have minutes of boards, commissions, and committees. Minutes of the Port Colborne Transit Advisory Committee meeting of September 11th, 2019, and minutes of the Port Colborne Active Transportation Advisory Committee meeting of November 18th, 2019. A mover and a seconder. Councillor Desmarais, Councillor Bruno. Questions to either of those minutes? All those in favor? Carried unanimously. Consideration of bylaws, Madam Clerk.
Yes, there are a number of bylaws this evening. Bylaw 6753-04-20 to Bylaw 6758-09-20. And just note that Bylaw 6755-06-20, which is the cannabis zoning bylaw, will be amended with the motions just passed by Councillor Wells.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Mover and a seconder. Councillor Beauregard, Councillor Danch. Any questions? All in favor? Opposed? That's unanimous. Ladies and gentlemen, great meeting. We are adjourned. Very good.